رودی جولیانی. بسیار شورانگیز است که در بزرگترین گردهمایی مجازی در جهان شرکت کنیم. وصل ارتباط از طریق زوم غیر قابل تصور است، آن هم از 102 کشور از تقریباً 30,000 نقطه.
مردم ایران به همه دنیا به روشنی نشان داده‌اند خواهان یک ایران آزاد و دموکراتیک و صلح‌آمیز هستند. اینها دقیقاً همان اهداف شورای ملی مقاومت ایران است. دقیقاً همان اهداف سازمان مجاهدین است.
مریم رجوی یک قهرمان بوده و رهبری متعهد است که آگاهی بسیار عمیقی از درد و رنج مردم ایران و ضرورت‌های رساندن ایران به یک آلترناتیو دموکراتیک در برابر این رژیم دارد.
روزی را تصور کنید که این رژیم دهشتناک سقوط کند. حضور یک زن در رأس دولت موقت به نظر من به طور کامل بخش‌های بزرگی از خاورمیانه و جهان را تغییر خواهد داد.
مدافعان رژیم ایران در آمریکا و غرب، کسانی که از این رژیم پول می‌گیرند، می‌گفتند شورای ملی مقاومت و مجاهدین خیلی ارزش ندارند، یک فرقه هستند و هواداران کمی دارند و از شانس جایگزین کردن این رژیم برخوردار نیستند.
اما اگر به اظهارات خامنه‌ای و دست نشانده او روحانی در همین سال گذشته گوش کنید، چندین بار گفتند که تنها خطر برای رژیمشان شورای ملی مقاومت و سازمان مجاهدین هستند.
تغییر رژیم در ایران در دسترس است. به مدافعان رژیم که برای این کار پول میگیرند گوش نکنید.
Maryam Rajavi, distinguished participants, and all of us gathered here in order to move forward with a free, democratic, and peaceful Iran. I'm joined, as you can see, by your great representative, advocate, friend, Bob Torricelli, and your equally staunch supporter, Joe Lieberman, two great American leaders and two people who are very, very staunch defenders and advocates of a free, democratic, and peaceful Iran. It's an honor to be with them, and it's an honor to be with you. And it's very exciting to be part of the largest virtual gathering in the world, connecting people on Zoom. I can't imagine it. From 102 countries, almost 30,000 different locations. The event, most importantly, is broadcast live in Iran to the people in Iran who are living under terror, tyranny, oppression. And let's say to them that this gathering is for them. This is to let them know that their fight for freedom is supported around the world, that there are freedom lovers, both Iranian and of all nationalities, that support you at the highest levels of their governments. The people of Iran, through their protests, starting in November of 2019 and almost continuously every week, every day, have demonstrated the great desire they have for freedom. And they've demonstrated in a way in which they've put their lives on the line. That is a very, very powerful demonstration of just how strong the desire for freedom is in Iran. In the very early days of those protests, over 1,500 people were killed by the murderous regime of terror. And the people of Iran have made it clear to the whole world that if they could have their way, and they're going to have it, they would want a free Iran, a democratic Iran, a peaceful Iran, an Iran ruled by law, an Iran where people can practice their religion, and an Iran in which women are treated the same as men. Those are precisely the goals of the National Council for Iranian Resistance, precisely the goals of MEK, and they are the goals enunciated by Maryam Rajavi in her very, very brilliant and universal 10 principles, which are completely consistent with the highest values of the United States and similar governments. Two slogans during the protest, I think, are vital to show how the people of Iran feel, because you can see these signs consistent through many of the 300 or so protests or more that have taken place. And it says, reformists, hardliners, the game is over. And then there's one that says, down with the dictator. Now, it's one thing for me to say that and to hold that sign here in America or in the United Kingdom or in France or Germany or wherever else you are. It is another thing to hold that sign in Tehran. That's a mark of death. It is very likely or very possible that you're going to be singled out to be one of those people who's shot down on the street if you oppose the regime. It is surely likely you're going to be murdered if you support the MEK or any similar movement. There's just no question about that. And despite that, and despite the 1,500 murders right at the beginning that continue to this day, the protests are not slowing. The protests are not lessening. They're becoming greater and greater and greater. As stated in the letter that was signed by the 31 U.S. dignitaries to set forth our belief, we say as a group, there is a beacon of hope in this dark landscape. The one organization that has done more than any other, including governments, to free Iranian citizens from tyranny and the world from fundamentalist-inspired terrorism is the National Council of Resistance of Iran, NCRI. The NCRI strives relentlessly to ensure that hope for democracy and an end to injustice and tyranny remains alive in Iran. Additionally, with continual media outreach, publications, and meetings, it sustains international attention on the ongoing assault against humanity, and may I add, by the regime of terror. The NCRI is under the leadership of Maryam Rajavi, a woman who has the respect of all of us. She's been a hero, and she is a dedicated leader with tremendous, tremendous understanding of the plight of the Iranians and what's needed to bring Iran to a democratic alternative for the regime. I outlined before her clear program of principles about freedom of religion and, of course, gender equality. The mere fact that she's a woman leading a group like this is revolutionary. Can you imagine? Can you imagine when this terrible regime falls, and it will fall, and she's the interim leader, to have a woman as the head of state? I believe it will completely transform a great deal of the Middle East and a great deal of the world. The NCRI under Madam Rajavi offers for us the universal vision of freedom, going back to the Old Testament and all through civilizations. This has been the quest of the human heart, the human soul. And again, that's illustrated by the fearless people in Iran who demonstrate for freedom despite the fact that they can see that their lives can be taken. It happens right in front of them. The MEK is the main component of the NCRI. And with its network, it's the driving force for change. And that's the reason why the regime is singled out for murder. There are those Iranian apologists here in America and in the West, people who are paid by the Iranian regime, who say the NCRI and the MEK don't amount to much. They're a cult. They have very few followers. They have no chance to replace the regime. But then if you listen to the words of the Ayatollah and his puppet, Rohani, just over the last year, 2 or 3 times the Ayatollah and 4 or 5 times Rohani have said that the only threat to their regime, the only organization that has any chance to put together a government to replace them, is the NCRI and the MEK. I mean, it's amazing they would admit that, but they do. It's equally amazing that the corrupt Western press suppresses that. I can only attribute that to the power of the lobbying organizations for Iran who have sold their souls to the regime of terror. But we know the truth, and they know the truth. They know that this organization is a total threat to them. And when they see today this gathering of people taking advantage of Zoom and the new modern methods of communication, they and our ability to broadcast all throughout Iran, despite their best efforts to block us, they realize they have a formidable foe. They realize and can foresee how this group could easily stand up an interim government that could be a bridge to a permanent, democratic, free, prosperous, and wonderful Iran, because the Iranian people deserve that. And the Iranian people can sustain that. The economy in Iran is collapsing. And that's a tragedy. No one wants to see that. It's horrible to see these demonstrations. And the one that sticks in my mind, I know it goes back about a year, but I can't get it out of my mind, is the man who was standing there asking for $400 or $500. He would sell one of his kidneys for $400 or $500. That means you and your family are starving. And equally poignant and desperate signs. People are starving. Even when Iran was getting a flow of money, like the $1.7 billion in cash that I will never understand, that was delivered to Iran as the price of the ill-fated nuclear agreement, people in Iran were starving. And now, with the much more effective sanctions that have been in effect since the new administration came into power in Washington, the sanctions have been crushing. And now with coronavirus adding to it, I mean, the level of poverty and the level of hunger and the level of pain in Iran is heartbreaking. The only solace is that this is what happens when revolution takes place. This is what happened in the Soviet Union that led to the collapse of a much, much bigger empire. All of Eastern Europe. And it's tragic that it's not recognized that this regime is on the brink right now, particularly with its handling of coronavirus, in which they allowed 70,000 or more of their people to die without any help. The government at one point allocated $1 billion to help the people, which would have been totally insufficient. And only 30% of it has been distributed. Everybody in Iran knows that the reason that the people of Iran are suffering is not only the sanctions, it's not only coronavirus, it's the fact that they still allocate tremendous sums of money to terrorist groups all over the world. They'd rather send people to bomb us in Paris or to kill some of you in America than to feed their people. They'd rather allocate money to renegade criminal groups that want to wreak havoc in Europe or in the United States than feed their people. And everyone in Iran knows that. That's why they're not only religious maniacs, they're just plain common criminals. They're crooks, thieves. When people say mullahs, they have this religious concept. To me, the mullahs are like the people who ran the mafia, the people I prosecuted who ran the mafia and extorted their people, extorted the Italian-American people, and subjugated them, except this is on a much bigger scale. And the Ayatollah is like the head of the mafia. He's a very wealthy man, the Ayatollah. And I do question his religious sincerity. No man can be a man of God that is a mass murderer. That's completely hypocritical. And then he asks people to sacrifice their life for the cause of tyranny. But does he sacrifice his life? He's not the one going out there and doing the suicide bombings, nor are the fat mullahs who are living wonderful lives off the misery of their own people. This has to be recognized, and it's only going to be recognized with the advocacy of a group like the NCRI and MEK. They're the group that is the most courageous and the most honest about what's going on in Iran. Experience has shown that dictatorship doesn't change on its own. The old saying, a leopard doesn't change its spots, is quite true, particularly a dictator. And despite all of the concessions provided under the JCPOA, the Iranian regime didn't change one bit. In fact, it got worse. It continued its suppression of the Iranian people. It continued its march to becoming a nuclear power. And it continued to be the single biggest state sponsor of terrorism in the world. And since America has ceased to comply with that agreement, has cut it off, and has stopped sending them billions of dollars in cash, the country's been under maximum pressure. And we've got to keep that pressure up to remove the ruling theocracy. Regime change in Iran is within reach. Don't listen to the pessimists and don't listen to the Iranian apologists who are paid to say that. It's within reach. The same things are happening in Iran that have happened numerous times in other countries. When we wake up one morning and we're surprised and we find out, oh my goodness, the Berlin Wall is coming down. Oh my goodness, the Soviet Union is no more. Poland is becoming free. It happened over a long period of time. It happened with the same conditions we're seeing now. But when it happened like that. And that's what's going to happen here. And that's the goal of the NCRI. And that's the goal of Maryam Rajavi. It's very, very simple. The goal is a free Iran that will be a contributing nation to peace in the world, to a better world. This is the heritage of the Iranian people. This is one of the great civilizations that goes back to time immemorial. How much has the Persian civilization given to us? And how much more can it give to us if it's allowed to be free? The goal of Maryam Rajavi and all of us here is not to impose anyone on the Iranian people. The goal is to see regime change. There is a shadow government to handle the interim, so we don't have the situation that we had in Iraq several years ago. So the government can continue and the people can start to prosper immediately. But within less than a year, the goal is to have free and fair elections, to establish a rule of law from day one, to make certain that women participate in government to the same extent as men and in society, and that all of you are free to practice your religion as you see fit, or not practice religion, and to immediately end the nuclear program, and to make clear that Iran wants to rejoin the community of civilized nations. That'll be interim. And then the Iranian people will decide who do they want, what kind of constitution they want. That's the goal of this organization and the millions of people that support it and the people that are watching today. It's all going to happen. It's all going to happen the way I say. We're going to wake up one morning and we're going to be surprised that the regime fell. It's teetering right now. And when that happens, you're going to have your name etched in that great book of liberators. And the one whose name will be in the largest, boldest print will be Miriam Rajavi. Stand with Miriam Rajavi. Stand with Miriam Rajavi. Stand with Miriam Rajavi. Thank you. Madam Rajavi, it is my pleasure on behalf of 31 of your very, very loyal, long supporters in the United States, including, of course, Bob Torricelli, Joe Lieberman, and all of the others who are faithfully with you every year and then whenever needed to help with this great cause. We have this letter that we'd like to deliver to you to talk about the importance of the NCRI to the fight for freedom in Iran, how crucial it's been and how important it is to support it, because it's really the vehicle that we have to a democratic government. And also to express our admiration to you, because there is one leader of this group that stands above all others, and it's you, Miriam Rajavi. And here's the letter. I know you have it, but symbolically I want to present it to you. You're welcome.
Mayor Giuliani, Senator Lieberman, Senator Torricelli, distinguished American personalities, thank you for your support for the people of Iran in their struggle for freedom and democracy. Your statement calls to hold the criminal leaders of the Iranian regime accountable. Leaders of this regime have committed crimes against humanity and must be brought to justice. This regime is responsible for 120,000 political executions, massacre of 30,000 political prisoners in Iran, and several terrorist attacks in the world. It is time for the international community to take action. I call on all freedom-loving people to support your important initiative. Once again, I thank you for all your efforts, and God bless you. Thank you.